again, it's a new day and a new edition of Riffley's Roundtable. This time I'm hoping to wrap up the Afghan reconfiguration, but we'll see how long this discussion takes. I'm going to try to squeeze in two videos this time. I'm trying to keep these 15 to 25 minutes or so, so we'll see if we make it. If not, I'll do a part 4 because the last one is pretty dense. So the first video I wanted to talk about is...
What's up, y'all? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. And
Robert Durden, the hilariously named Political Fight Club, and I've been subscribed to him probably about 2 weeks or something. His channel has really taken off. But it's funny, I just now got the Durden Fight Club connection, so there's that. So basically what Robert does is he kind of his video is a little bit briefer than the first two I've discussed. I think Scott's was about half hour or so, and I know that Corrupted Paul was about an hour. But Robert really breaks down, I think, the basics of the Afghan withdrawal, and he talks in particular about the 13 U.S. servicemen who recently died a few days ago. Now it's September 3rd right now. His video, I think, was probably about a week ago. And his key question, which is mine as well, and which was mine the moment that I heard about this this withdrawal that was happening, was, is it real? Basically, anytime the government says anything now, and particularly about war, your first thought is, are they telling the truth? It's not even that, because you can sort of assume that any sort of relationship to the truth is coincidental, not to sound bitter, but more sort of what's the agenda, what would they like us to think? So it seems to me most of the government rhetoric, is particularly around war at this point, is more perception management than disclosure. So typically they seem to say things with an eye toward having a certain effect on the sort of the people's collective psyche, their collective sort of impression of what is going on. So at the time when Robert was making this video, I think there was only 10 to 12 speculated U.S. casualties in that attack. I believe now it's 13. I'd have to go back and look. So the key question, one key question I would say Robert focuses on, and then one, that was me, in case you're checking your Teams, Microsoft Teams. And then the other key sort of issue is he talks a lot, and I think very, very smartly, about sort of the way that the media are used to sort of generate the kind of emotional reaction that is sort of these fatalities, these casualties. Basically, not to sound too callous, but the need seems to be to use these casualties to create a certain emotional mood in the American people, and it seems like Robert is speculating that this sort of manufactured emotional response is going to be used to what he calls a yo-yo the troops.
And you want to know how I knew that Biden was going to yo-yo the troops? Because I've been watching Kyle Kulinski for the last 7 years, and he's the one that pointed out to me along the years where all of the presidents yo-yo the troops.
Is a term I'm going to steal. They're going to pull out the troops and then sort of send them back in. And that seems to me to make sense. It really kind of depends on what their sort of strategic needs are in Afghanistan, whether they need boots on the ground to do that. And there's a few different ways we can think about this, because now we know that the U.S. has also equipped the Taliban, or whoever ends up sort of taking control of the country in the long run, with, it seems like, a rather massive amount of U.S. military material. So to send troops back into that, knowing that the indigenous forces they'll be going up against will be newly armed with U.S. Weapons. I'm not exactly sure why that would be something that the military would want. But I'm not even exactly sure that that story had gotten out, because I'm getting to these things as I can get around to them, and Robert's video is a few days old by now, so that story may not have been prominent at that time. But in any case, so the key question is, I think I feel pretty confident that this is not going to be a Vietnam type of situation where it's just all hands off and we just sort of leave Afghanistan to their own devices. But a thought had occurred to me that I kind of researched this. This is a topic I don't know very, very much about. So obviously, I believe Afghanistan has a lot of lithium, and they have a lot of other natural minerals that are quite valuable. And because the country is so underdeveloped, and this is true in its own way of Iraq as well, a lot of these resources are kind of just waiting for whoever the first actor is to come along with the civilian infrastructure needed to sort of draw them out of the ground. But what's a much more interesting question is what's going on with the opium. So, of course, the Taliban was in control in 2001 of Afghanistan, and that coincided with a massive drop in the amount of opium production in that country. And as you know, our pharmaceutical companies, in order to sort of look after our welfare, have created these powerful painkillers, opiates. And I didn't know which ones were synthetic and which ones actually used real opium. OxyContin and oxycodone, I believe Rush Limbaugh's favorite, the latter. A little trip to the past. Use the real thing, and fentanyl uses a synthetic. If I might have that right. So one of the reasons why I thought it was possible that they may actually want to drop Afghanistan altogether is that they've either found a synthetic opiate that they can use in the OxyContin and oxycodone to substitute for the opium being produced in Afghanistan. The other possibility is that they've struck a deal with the Taliban to keep the poppy fields open this time, and keep that sort of source of revenue flowing for the Western pharmaceutical companies. But I mean, I suppose time will tell which it is, and also whether we end up sending troops back, or whether it seems like sort of a transition to a covert war, like has happened in Iraq, ends up in the offing, would be another way to sort of track that question. Well, it's more interesting. The other thing that Robert does, I think, very excellently in his videos, he talks about the use of the media for basically perception management.
They'll try to get the most shocking images that they can of this suicide bombing, plaster it all over mainstream media in the United States in order to sway popular opinion that we need to stay there. This is just out of the manufacturing consent playbook. I could predict this a week ago. Why? Because they do it all the time. There's a reason that when I say, all those people falling from the Twin Towers face down to their death, and all those images of the planes hitting the Twin Towers, it evokes in your brain right now exactly what images I'm talking about. You know exactly what videos I'm talking about. Now, those were horrible events, but they ran those over and over and over again, because when you do that, it creates flashbulb memories in your psyche.
As I say, so we had these 13 fatalities, these casualties, and basically the way that they are being portrayed in the media is being done so that a certain emotional response is expected. So obviously the coffins come out of out from the back of these cargo carriers, and Joe Biden and Jill and so on are standing on site to just commemorate, or sort of grieve the offloading of these coffins. And it has a certain effect on some people, the different effect on others. Joe Biden apparently looked at his watch several times. That's not something Robert brought up, but then I can remember. But one of the things that was interesting to me, so he talks about, I believe it was Duma, and these two, I didn't know about this, these two children who were sadly killed in the alleged chemical attack there, and that they had been arranged into a sort of a state like, if you ever seen Patton, which I would definitely recommend if you hadn't. There's two soldiers who were sort of embracing with each other as they're fighting. So these two children their corpses were put into a sort of an embrace by it seems like basically sort of PR people trying to set up a certain kind of image, certain kind of narrative, kind of a presentation, almost like basically a PR presentation. It sounds callous to say, but that really seems to be the bon mot. So he talks about that, and he talks about sort of the George Floyd killing. He talks about the jumpers on 9/11. And a lot of these just gut-wrenching images that we're subjected to in order to manufacture consent by manipulating the viewer's compassion, presumed compassion. I mean, one of the things I'm sadly probably going to return to more than once is that I think the compassion of the typical TV viewer is perhaps a little exaggerated, but it does create. I mean, basically, I think a lot of times the alleged compassion is sort of a fig leaf for an impulse toward aggression, frankly, among regular people. But that kind of comes to another point that I'll get to in a minute. So, a term that he uses is flash bulb imagery. Another thing I'm going to steal from him. And one of the points he seems to make is that some of these images take, and some of them don't. So they're always kind of trying to sort of throw things out there to see what has an emotional impact on the viewer, to get the people to thinking in a way that is conducive to whatever the policy imperatives are that are upcoming for the government. So they want people on board with what they're planning, and we don't know what they're planning. One way we can try to find out is to sort of look at these sort of propaganda maneuvers and see what they seem to be designed to try and make us think or feel. And so one of the things, I got a kind of a shtick that I like to talk to when I talk about advertising, which now that the news is basically, the corporate news is basically sort of an offshoot of government policy, and it's sponsored by the pharmaceutical companies and the weapons manufacturers in particular. The pharmaceutical company interest is clear in terms of the poppy situation that we discovered earlier. But now that the war is quote unquote over, there's a lot of inventory being taken of sort of what went on, and so what people, there's the U.S. casualties, then there's the Afghan casualties. I've heard are about 250,000. I've seen the number 26,000 children dead out there, but who knows how accurate these is? In terms of monetary costs, the figure I keep saying is $2 trillion. So, and what they say is we spent $2 trillion on Afghanistan. Of course, that's not quite accurate. We gave military contractors $2 trillion of taxpayer money. That's actually what happened. It didn't just get burned. It went to weapons manufacturers and other sort of military contractors. Anyway, I wanted to make the term I wanted to make up for the media, for this sort of media that's used to manufacture consent for these kinds of wars is traumagenic. So the George Floyd killing and the 911 jumpers and the 13 military casualties. These are all traumatic images that are deliberately presented over and over and over again in order to sort of create, again, the flashbulb memory, which is it actually, in a vicarious sense, it does traumatize the viewer. And I think that's important to remember. If you're going to convince the taxpayers to give up $2 trillion of their money for basically nothing, I mean, it's less than nothing. I don't know that the Afghan war has accomplished anything except that those $2 trillion. We don't even know if the opium is going to still be available. So that's an open question. That's a hard sell. So you're going to need a lot of trauma. The last thing I wanted to say was that I have kind of a shtick. And I think I started down this road before. I have a shtick that I like to talk about when I talk about advertising and how it functions. And advertising mainly is meant to create two reactions, either and or both, either fear or entitlement. So the examples I always use are getting a little dated. Was if you're watching a commercial break, 1 minute you might see a health insurance company say, ask you what would happen to your family if you were to die tomorrow, and that obviously is exploiting fear. It's also exploiting a lot of other, sort of ancillary emotions like guilt, of course, and since commercials just are stringed together more or less at random, your next ad might be McDonald's telling you that you deserve a break today. So that's the entitlement side of it, right? So fear or entitlement. And then obviously, there's other things that can be created, such as hatred. So, and that tends to that can come along with fear or entitlement. So if you like, say, a burglary commercial, for a burglary alarm, you have sort of a shadowy character with a ski cap, skulking around the windows and doors of your house. And, then sometimes there's two versions shown. If you didn't get the burglar alarm, they come in and they kill your family, take all your stuff. If you do, then they try to come in, the alarm goes off, and they sort of shriek and run off. That's kind of, so the hatred part would be the hatred that generates for the burglar character, right, presented in the commercial. And this is sort of a smaller version of, obviously, this advertising campaign being used to sort of soften up the American public for whatever the next step is in Afghanistan is a much more elaborate affair, but much more grand in scale. But I think the same principles still apply, that entitlement and fear, along with hatred, are going to be the three emotions that you're going to see catered to in the future as this PR push to land the next whatever the next stage of the Afghan adventure is going to be. But again, my guess is, with this sort of pivot over to domestic issues with the Texas abortion rights issue, that it's going to be a situation of the latter, and that means that the advertising campaign for Afghanistan is probably going to start to wind down. As you'll notice that we hardly ever hear about Iraq anymore, even though I think that we're still there doing the covert aspect of things. Okay, well, so yeah, I didn't get around the empire, so I will talk about that next time, and that'll be the conclusion of this Afghan reconfiguration series.